She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "But I thought you understood me." And in that moment, I felt the floor crack beneath our friendship. Let me take you back. I'm 23 years old, a lesbian, someone who spent a long time figuring out who I was, learning how to love that person, and navigating a world that doesn't always make that easy. And then there's my friend, also 23, straight, or at least that's what he says. A man who hates being a man, who insists adamantly that he's not trans. And yet, nearly every time we talk, he tells me how much he wishes he were born a girl. Not just in a passing, wistful sort of way, but in long, spiraling conversations where he speaks about women like they're celestial beings, divine, effortlessly beautiful. To him, men, including himself, are nothing short of disgusting. Physically gross, he says. No real man can feel beautiful the way a woman can. At first I listened. I cared. I wanted to be the friend who could sit through the storm. But the more he shared, the heavier it became. Because as much as he claims to admire women, it started to feel like something else. Something that wasn't admiration. Something that felt like envy, wrapped in a kind of resentment. Especially when he talked about lesbians. That part always hit different. The way he spoke, it wasn't hateful, but it wasn't kind either. It was like I became the living, breathing symbol of something he couldn't have. And he made sure I knew it. At first, I told myself I could take it. That maybe he just needed someone to hear him. Maybe he was struggling in ways I couldn't see. But every time we spoke, I walked away with my chest tight and my hands shaking. I wasn't just sad. I was anxious. Like I was slowly shrinking in a space that used to feel safe. I didn't want to be the reason he spiraled further. I didn't want to be the friend who abandoned someone in pain. But I also didn't want to keep sacrificing my peace to be his emotional dumping ground. So one day, after another heavy, hour-long conversation, where he spiraled into this monologue about how unfair it was that women got to be beautiful, that lesbians, especially, didn't have to deal with the disgusting pressure of being men, I finally told him, please, stop. I told him I couldn't be the one to carry this for him anymore. That hearing his jealousy, especially directed at people like me, was starting to hurt. That I wasn't equipped to help him with something this deep, and honestly, this complicated. And then he said the words, I'll never forget. You're being a bad friend. He said I was the only person he could talk to, that no professional could help him, because no therapist could make him be born a girl. That he wasn't trans. He didn't want hormones or surgery. He just hated being male and needed someone to understand that. And apparently, that someone had to be me. I remember standing there, stunned, not because I didn't expect a reaction, but because of what his words revealed. That he didn't just want a friend. He wanted a therapist, a savior, a receptacle for his emotional pain. And if I didn't comply, I was selfish. But here's the thing. I've never been trained to unpack gender identity crises. I don't have the tools to help someone swim through a storm that's swallowing them whole. And even if I did, at what cost? I told him, gently but firmly, that I couldn't be his only outlet, that I wanted the best for him, truly, but that I was drowning under the weight of his words, that his admiration of women didn't feel like support anymore. It felt like obsession, like fetishization, like I was being watched under glass, not known. And that's when he pulled the final card, guilt. You just don't want to deal with uncomfortable truths. You're lucky to be who you are. I just wanted to be honest about how I feel. Is that so wrong? He looked at me like I'd betrayed him, like I was the villain in a story where he was just trying to be vulnerable. And in that moment, I realized something painful. To him, my boundaries weren't just inconvenient, they were offensive. And when your pain becomes a problem for someone else, they will find a way to make it your fault. I haven't spoken to him since. I think about that conversation often, about how complicated it all is, how people can carry deep wounds that manifest in ways that look like flattery, but feel like control. How people can call something truth when it's really just a projection of hurt. And how, sometimes, the kindest thing you can say is no. Because empathy without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. So, am I the asshole? Was I wrong for refusing to be his emotional therapist? For protecting my own peace in the face of his pain? Or was I just finally choosing myself after being someone else's safety net for too long? You tell me. You know, when I first read this post, I sat in silence for a long time. Because this story isn't just about one conversation between two friends. It's about emotional boundaries. It's about what happens when someone turns your identity into their fantasy, their grief, their envy, and then demands your compassion as payment for their pain. There's a kind of heartbreak that comes from being needed in all the wrong ways. From being told, "You're the only one I can talk to," when what they really mean is, "You're the only one I'll burden without consequence." And for anyone listening who's been in that position, friend, partner, sibling, you know how crushing that can feel. Yes, we should be there for the people we care about, but we are not their therapists. We are not their saviors, and we are not their mirror for self-loathing. This story also reminds us of something else: the danger of idealization, of turning women, or queer people, or any group into symbols of what you think you're lacking, instead of people with their own complexity. Because when someone looks at you and only sees what they wish they could be, they stop seeing you at all. So to everyone out there, it is not cruel to say, "I can't carry this for you." It is not selfish to protect your peace. It is not betrayal to say, "This is where I end and you begin." And to those who are struggling with identity, with pain, with loneliness, please hear this with love. You deserve support. You deserve healing. But your friends are not your therapy. Find someone trained to hold that space. Don't demand it from people already stretched thin, just trying to stay whole. Because love is not measured by how much pain someone endures for you. It's measured by how much space you give each other to grow. So, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone you cared about because they couldn't see where you ended and they began, you're not alone. You're not the asshole. You're human.